Well, hello and good evening to all of you out there joining us on Facebook tonight. It is the 1st of October, and that can only mean one thing. It is, of course, the first day of Black History Month. And I have to say that this year on the wall, it's our biggest and boldest Black History Month festival to date. And it's also part of a citywide festival that's been put together by the creative organisations of Liverpool, a collective otherwise known as Cool. There's been a huge programme put together by Cool and some of our other cultural partners. So on behalf of the collective, I'd like to thank the Lord Mayor's Office and Culture Liverpool for their support in getting the biggest Black History Month cultural offer to date, I would say. Unsurprisingly, writing on the wall, our Black History Month is inspired by the global Black Lives Matter protests that have characterised our summer, beginning in cities and towns across America following the racist killing of George Floyd by police. Those protests were inspirational. They went global, and so too as our festival this year. We've got a real transatlantic connection going on. Some incredible guests from across the pond, as you might say. We've got we've got Booker Prize winning novelist Marlon James, and Liverpool 8 born and raised Stephen Small, who's now a professor at Berkeley University. Also from Berkeley, we've got Dr. Harry Evans, who will be joining Emmy Onyora and John Barnes in a discussion on athlete activism. And Krip-hop stars of the celebrated Netflix documentary Phoenix Rising will be joining us to talk about music, race and disability and how those things interconnect. If you check out our writer's block next week, you'll meet Afrofuturist author and broadcaster Yatasha Yomak, who's returning to WoW from Chicago, and she'll be resident on the block there for 3 weeks. So we aim for this month to keep the debates going around the crucial issues brought to the fore by Black Lives Matter and the wider anti-racist struggle. So we'll be looking at how the curriculum can be decolonised, how history can be set straight and made more truthful. We'll be looking at issues of policing and criminal justice, both here and abroad. Former Sheffield Mayor Majid will be teaching the art of disruption, and writer and journalist Sophie Williams will be looking for anti-racist allies. We've got our children's story time taking place with different writers and poets across the month, so there's something there for everybody. But this evening, our event is titled, So We Marched, What Next? And it's a question that one of the organisers of the huge Liverpool March posted on Facebook. And for me, it was the crucial question, and it remains the crucial question for the anti-racist movement. In the immediate wake of the Black Lives Matter protests, all manner of organisations, institutions, governments pledged their commitment to racial equality. But what we're seeing now is the racist backlash to the movement, and the debate centering not on the key areas like employment, education, health or housing, but being sidetracked into lesser issues around culture wars and terminology. So here with me this evening to explore what next, I've got an excellent panel. I've got student activist Kalade Ladipo, I keep saying that wrong, and the chair of the city's new race task force, Tracy Gore, and Member of Parliament for Riverside, Kim Johnson, and I'm delighted to welcome them all here to be with us tonight. Hi, Kim.
Hi, Madeline. Just trying to get my head around the technology. I'd just like to say a big thanks to you and WoW for the invite to tonight's event and for putting on such a fantastic festival throughout October. You just mentioned that I am the MP for Liverpool Riverside. I am very proud and privileged to have been elected the city's first Black MP last year. But it's also a very sad indictment for this city, isn't it? That it's taken so long for a community like Liverpool, with the longest established Black community dating back hundreds of years, for us to elect our first Black MP. And, and when people ask me, why has it taken so long and why are you first? But I make no apology when I say that it is because of deeply entrenched institutional racism. And a lot of people don't like hearing that, but it's true. I was born, I was raised, and still live in the constituency that I now represent. I lived in Liverpool. My school, St. Margaret's, for me was a great experience. I loved school. It was very ethnically diverse. We had lots of different groups of people from across the globe living and going to the school. And it wasn't until I left school, went to my secondary school, just literally a mile down the road to Lawrence Secondary School for girls, that I realised that things were different, because I was one of only a few Black girls at that school. And so it was kind of my introduction to how different society was going to be. I suppose, from that point of view. And it was a big culture shock. But I grew up with my dad telling me that as a Black person that I would have to work twice as hard as my white counterparts. I was raised to be Black and be proud. And so I've taken that with me, throughout my adulthood, because like when I was in school, the teachers had no aspirations for me as a Black working class girl from Liverpool 8. It was either I worked down the road in the Loon Laundry that used to exist on Lawrence Road, or get a job in a shop, and that was it. No one suggested further education or university to me, because they didn't think that was applicable to Black people. And I would imagine that things haven't much changed for a lot of our Black kids in our schools. But I've been a Labour Party supporter all of my working life, and a trade unions since I started work. But before I was elected, I worked in the council, I worked in adult social services, I was union rep and a member of the Staff Diversity Forum, but I was also the deputy chair of the Regional and Black Members Committee for Unison. And I would have to say that as a trade unionist, that the trade union movement and the Labour Party still have a long way to go to be inclusive for Black people. I was the Black Members Officer for Riverside CLP. And one of the reasons I became active and I got involved is because in this city, we lack political representation. So that was one of the reasons I got involved. Out of 90 councillors in our city council, we only have 6 Black Labour councillors. And from my point of view, that was appalling, and it's not good enough for 2020. But, for me, the 2019 Labour intake of MPs is the largest number of Black MPs in history, and most of us are women, but we need more. And the only way of doing that is encouraging getting people more active. And as the council worker and as a community development worker, I often found myself being the only Black person when I went to meetings, when I went to conferences, when I went to training events, and I'd have to be that person often that would have to raise the issue about equality and diversity. And, today I was on a Zoom with a lot of cultural and arts-based organisations from across the north. Is an event called, I can't remember the name of the event. Anyway, it was organisations from across the whole of the north, and they produced a terms of reference for this group. And sadly, it didn't have anything in it that related to equality and diversity. And again, it's down to say, well, you know, having to remind people that this needs to happen, you know, and I think what 2020 has done has raised a very bright light on equality and diversity, particularly in terms of Black Lives Matter and COVID-19.
I'm going to jump in, Kim, because you're touching on a whole load of issues.
Okay, love.
I'm hoping that we'll all be able to discuss in more detail. But that is a brilliant introduction to you.
Oh, I went on too long. Sorry, love.
No. It's enthusiasm, and it's great to see.
Thanks, man. Do I need to unmute and turn my video off now?
No, it's fine. It's fine. Really, I just want the audience to get a sense, because I'm sure many people watching this now will know who you are, Kim, but some people won't, and I just wanted people to get a sense of who our panelists are and your background, and that's a brilliant introduction, so thanks for that. And I'm going to pass over to Tracy Gore. So Tracy, if you could tell us a little bit about your experience, and in particular around the struggle for racial equality.
Yeah, sure. So I guess my experience very similar to Kim, really, in terms of you know, born and raised in Liverpool and in Liverpool 8. You know, my school experience in terms of racism, my first experience was in my first year in senior school, being told by the maths teacher that you know, I'll never amount to much and certainly won't pass any exams. And that whole issue that Kim raised, which is around expectation and aspiration, and that just didn't exist in our school. And I guess Kim and I are of similar age. So there was no expectation, aspiration, or inspiration even in terms of school and what was expected of you. In terms of my activism in terms of racism, I guess, and trying to challenging that, mainly through voluntary work in the initial stages. So I became a volunteer management committee member of Steve Biko Housing Association when that was first set up, before I had any properties in its early stages. I wasn't a founding member, but I was an early member. Worked in work. I chaired and was a member first of all of the Black Staff Group, and became the chair of the Black Staff Group in Housing Association. I used to work for Merseyside Improved Houses, now known as Riverside, and so I chaired the Black Staff Group, which was really important. I was management committee member, treasurer of Amadudu Black Women's Refuge, helped them get started up. So it wasn't me. I was, you know, I was a founding member of the organisation once it had the property, because I was there when we were able to get the funding, get the building. That was my involvement. The idea wasn't my idea, but I was certainly there in terms of helping Black Women's Refuge get set up in Liverpool, and also a number of other Black-led organisations I've been involved in and helping them along their journey. I guess more recently, you know, I've returned to Steve Biko Housing Association as its director, and that is a Black-led to Black Housing Association, specifically for you know, prioritising Black and other ethnic minority people, and more importantly, the work of Steve Biko is around our community engagement, development, the advocacy work that we do for our Black communities, and really important to the organisation, to me personally, to do that. And also working with our young people and our youth clubs and youth organisations, and doing all that interagency and intergenerational work, really important, particularly around our Black youth. We've started off, within Steve Biko, have our annual Young Black Achievers Awards ceremony. I think we're coming up to our 9th year now. Really important that those kids, you know, who do get the aspiration, the inspiration. So we celebrate those kids who've got their A levels, who are going into university, who may be doing their MVQs, and, you know, not necessarily academic, but let's celebrate those kids, and let's have those younger kids who see those older kids achieving enabling that to happen. And we do that every year. I'm really proud of that project, and Bev Williams, who kind of leads on that for Steve Biko as well. And then and just in general, in terms of the advocacy work on a strategic level, I chair the Equalities in Housing group. I lead on the hate crime work that goes on across this city. So in respect of kind of anti-racism work, it's really important to me, and I've done it throughout my working career.
Thanks, Tracy. And just thinking about Steve Biko and Amadou, the one of the few, you know, the part of a dwindling number of Black-led organisations still in Liverpool. Later, maybe we can talk about why those organisations are dwindling later. Thank you for that. And now I'm over to Pilade, and I need to apologise first of all. It seemed like no matter how many times I practiced your surname, I was going to get it wrong. So apologies for that, Pilade. But could you share with us some of your experience, please?
Yes. So I left school around 2 years ago. So I'm 20 years old, and my time at school was very challenging, as I was one of 5 maximum in every school I went to. In my first school, it was just me and my sister in our year, which then led to about 3 of us in our year. So I've always been a minority in my year, but in terms of the whole school and in general, there's only been about maximum 20 of us in the whole school. So not a lot either, which is definitely a progressive thing. I think it's definitely much better than it was before, but it's getting better. But school was hard for me. There were times when I felt like I couldn't really pinpoint why I was targeted. And then as you grow older, you tend to realize what that was. It was racism. You also don't have the tools or the right knowledge to actually confrontate these people that are being rude to you, disrespecting you purely because of the color of your skin, your age mate, your peers, just being disrespectful for no reason. But I am now at a stage where I'm able to converse with them and talk to them about how I feel, how I felt, and now we're at a stage where they're like, okay, cool, this is wrong, and using the N-word isn't appropriate, it's not right, I don't personally use it. But that was school. School was difficult, but by the time I left school, I was much more able to vocalize my feelings and my emotions when it came to racial matters. When I left school, I quickly found a group of friends at university. There was, again, only a handful of us. I went to university in Goldsmith before moving to Liverpool. There was, again, only about 5 of us in our whole course, which is crazy for a town for a city like London in Goldsmith. But we gravitated to each other very quickly from the first week. I literally saw them the other week, which was really lovely. And together we gave ourselves that confidence as black people. In fact, they're all girls, and I think Black women are just amazing. They're very important to my upbringing, my mother, my twin sister. So Black women are very inspirational in my livelihood. But in terms of my career and my work, I think racial matters is much more difficult. As an actor, as a dancer, there's a lot of things I've experienced on set. The way Black women have been treated, colorism is just insane. Using a white woman instead of a Black woman, even though the Black woman was much more talented. Being a gay Black man, that's the intersectionality is very important on set. Being on set, not always being the most masculine person, I've been ostracized. Choosing a white male dancer over me just because it looks more pleasing. But overall, my experience has been much better than some. I'm fortunate to say that, I am. But as I have grown older, I would say my experience has gotten a lot more challenging, especially during the demonstration. I was challenged a lot. A lot of people telling me that I don't need to be fighting for my right, that there's no racism, especially here in Liverpool. It was people from London saying, what are you doing in Liverpool? What's the point? People telling me, oh, as a Black person, I shouldn't be doing this. And I was confused because, one, no one should be telling any Black person how they should feel or what they should be doing at this point in time. On top of that, people who were from London had never been to Liverpool discussing the matter of Liverpool. That's incorrect to me. It's disrespectful to me. You've never even seen the city. You don't know what the city's like. You don't know what the Black people in the city are like. But it was one of those things where I had to take a step back, and because it is social media, I said, you know what, I'm not going to respond to it. At the end of the day, they don't know me, they don't know the effort that Kerry and Boston Nugent had and the force they had to plan that demonstration with all the ushers for the second one. But overall, I have faith in humanity, and I have faith that we are going to get somewhere where we're all going to say, okay, you know what, it's much better. It's getting better. Slowly, it is getting better, but it's still not where it needs to be. For example, I go to LIPA, and LIPA had a little moment at the beginning of the demonstration in June where our principal said all lives matter, and of course that's very problematic in terms of
that was actually one of the Kalani, that was one of the questions I had for you actually, about the principal statement that all lives matter. How, I mean, that went out on social media. How did that make you feel?
Well, funny enough, I had already spoken to my friend who had emailed him prior to that, and he had said something not quite as drastic as that, but something along the lines was saying something like, we don't respond to political matters, and that already was problematic. And then when he said that, I just felt very challenged. I didn't know if I should respond because it was a massive thing. My friend, my flatmate even, was the one who outed it on Twitter and was contacted by the BBC. And I felt like I was put in a very difficult position as a current student. Am I able to talk about this, or will I be ostracized when I go back to class? Will I be targeted because I'm a Black student still studying here in Liverpool, in LIPA? I felt that I couldn't speak out on the matter, even though I wasn't impressed and I didn't condone his words at all. So it made me feel very, very disrespected, very disrespected. I felt that the small Black community that we are anyways in that university, we were just completely outcasted, just pushed aside.
I remember years ago as an equalities trainer going into LIPA to do some race awareness training. It sounds like it's absolutely needed again, and particularly within the leadership of LIPA. But I just want to, you've mentioned the march, and I just want to talk about the Liverpool march. Was absolutely phenomenal, wasn't it? The level of support. Well, there was a few marches, but there was one absolutely massive one. And it was just brilliant to be part of, and yeah. But what I want to ask, and I'll throw this out to all of you. Black people in America are being killed with impunity, and that has been going on. I mean, I remember being in America, in New York, just after Eric Garner was murdered by police. The same chant went up from demonstrators, "I can't breathe." He was suffocated by police for selling cigarettes, I think was the crime. And there were demonstrations in particularly in New York, but in other cities. What do you think it was about this moment that went so global, that it went so big, that the opposition to racism in America at this time?
I think it was because of a perfect storm, if I'm totally honest with you, Madeline, because as I mentioned before, Black Lives Matter and COVID, and the fact that so many Black people have died disproportionately as a result of COVID kind of emphasise the point about racism, social inequality and poverty. And the fact that, you know, we find that often Black people are on the lowest rung. We saw in this country how our key front-facing workers were the ones that succumbed to the virus very early doors. And you will note from the media coverage in the first weeks of the lockdown that it was Black doctors that died. You know, doctors, nurses, bus drivers, tube drivers, all of those Black low-paid key workers putting their lives on the line to save and support others. So I think, you know, the death of the killing of George Floyd, and then witnessing the impact of COVID, you know, because it did fall on Black people, disproportionately. And I just think it created that bit of a perfect storm, really, to say that enough is enough. We need to make change, and we need to make change now. And I think that has shone a very bright light in 2020 on what needs to happen. And I think we need to galvanise that level of support and those feelings to start making some significant changes here, nationally and internationally.
Thanks, Kim. Tracy?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Kim said, and I think that particular moment, though, it was, when we've seen clips of killings before, we've never seen it so starkly, and there's always been an ability for the police to kind of excuse what's happened, and there was no excuse in that. It was absolutely there, right, front to face, wasn't it? From the whole 9 minutes, over 9 minutes of that police officer very casually, and we heard it before, knee on the neck, hands in the pockets, the casualness of killing somebody before everybody's eyes. There was no getting away from that. There was no excusing it, and there was no hiding it. And I think that's what outraged everybody. It took everybody, all those other murders and killings that have happened over the years. Every one of them was relived, but this one just took every one of those lives that have been lost were absolutely devastating. But this one actually, I think this one was just so in everybody's face, and not just for Black people who kind of see it and understand what's going on. It was there in the world's face. It doesn't matter what nationality you were, you couldn't hide it, and you had to be, I don't know, some type of person if you could not have been affected by what you saw.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, it was horrific to watch, and actually Buster Nugent was so angry that he had to stand on the gates of Prince's Park just to do something with that anger. Colade, what was the feeling at the university amongst young people following that moment?
For me, I felt really confused and conflicted, and I posted a YouTube video just explaining how I felt, and a lot of people my age actually said they agree. And it was the feeling of desensitization, the fact that we didn't feel anything, and the fact that we felt so empty. I know I felt really, really empty and just confused. As watching that video, you see it happen in 9 minutes, and then you think, at what point did he actually die? Was it at 8 minutes? Was it at 7 minutes? Because it was just, he just wouldn't get off his neck. And I think it was just like Tracy said, it's, you see it there, and it's a video that no one can explain. And I felt really lost because I wanted to be crying, but I just couldn't. And I think being a Black person, we are so desensitized to it. But now, funny enough for me, now it's completely reversed. I can't watch a video of someone being killed. I can't. It's very traumatic for me. And I think a lot of people can identify with that and can agree with that. It's seeing that video has completely switched everything for me. Before it was just, oh, another Black person dead on TV, another person on the news media, and we're just supposed to get on with our days. Now it was, no, we can't. We really can't just let this go again. Like, something has to be done, and something is being done. And that's how I think a lot of people my age felt. We all were just like, whoa, this one really just took us by surprise. It took us by storm. And I guess, and again, we were all like, Kim said, we're all in lockdown. We all had nothing to do. And it was just in our screens. It was on our tablets, it was on our iPads, it was on our phones. And it was just there. And we had nothing else to do but watch it. And we were forced to watch it. I think a lot of people were forced to recognize, oh, wait, this is a much, much bigger issue, because they were in their homes and they had to say, you know what? Yeah, let's do something about it.
Can I just say though as well, Madeleine, that the Americans don't have the monopoly on state-sanctioned killing of Black people. No, we've seen it in this country, the killing of Duggan in London a couple of years ago, that sparked off uprising. But, but even in our own city, we had a young man that was restrained in Liverpool city centre. that died as a result of that, so that happened in our city centre a couple of years ago, and then the police continue to embark on this type of action, and even since George Floyd, we've seen other examples of other police here and in America still continually behaving in that manner towards Black people, and what is it going to take to stop it? Because the death of George Floyd hasn't stopped it, has it? Because the Americans are still carrying on and still doing, Trump, supported a teenager, for killing Black Lives Matter supporters not so long ago, and is not condemned him. And while you've got a divvy like Trump and Boris Johnson leading these countries, where are we going to go?
Thanks, Kim. You're making me laugh at the word divvy, but it's not actually a funny topic. We're going to come on to America, but you talked about things that happen here in Liverpool, and I do want to bring the discussion a bit closer to home, and we'll come back to America later. But just at this point, just let me remind those of you watching at home on Facebook that you can join this discussion. If you want to type a question or you want to make a comment, please just put that in on the Facebook underneath the video, and that will come through to us. So yeah, Liverpool, really. I want to talk about Liverpool. So, in us older ones will remember this. This might be news to you, Collade, but the Gifford inquiry in 1989 described racial inequality in Liverpool as uniquely horrific. And I want to first of all start by asking Tracy and Kim how much they think has changed since then.
Can I say that? I was just going to say that from my point of view, because I'm old enough as well to know and have seen things, that I don't think really that things have changed. And I have said that from my point of view, things are worse now than they were back then, because the Gifford report provided opportunities for employment of Black staff, positive action. We've seen none of that in the city for a very long time. And as I mentioned, I work for the City Council, and City Council do not employ Black staff that represent the community in which it's served. And it's an issue that I used to raise with the Chief Exec, with the Mayor, and I raised as the Staff Diversity Forum on a regular basis, and things haven't changed. And often what we found is that Black staff during the 10 years of austerity would be the ones that would be often identified in terms of being downgraded or losing their jobs to a certain extent, and would have to vote with their feet because they'd lost so much money. And we lost an awful lot of Black staff over the last 10 years because of service reviews and changes within the council. So I have to be quite negative in that I don't think things have changed, and I think things are a lot worse in our city for Black people, unfortunately.
I was looking at council statistics. It's telling that a lot of the statistics are out of date anyway. But I think the number of Black and racial minority staff as a whole was something like 6% employed by the council. And at the very, just by the census, our population is 13%, though it's going to be much more than
it's
that.
Not just the council, it's right across the public sector and private sector. Well.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to come in on, which is actually, and I agree with Kim. So in the wake of the Giffords inquiry and report, there was a kind of a clamour for action, and there were things that were put in place, particularly around the public sector, and the positive action was probably one of the largest responses. But if you look now in any organisation, not just the City Council, if you look at the housing sector, we were also, big supporters of the positive action and taking people on. But if we shine a light into any of those organisations now, in terms of employment, we've all gone backwards. absolutely. And Kim's right. It is absolutely not just the public sector. This has been an issue in terms of right across the board. And the other thing that I would say is, let's not just keep this to employment. This is in any field that you look at, in any sector, whether it's the criminal justice sector, whether it's our educational attainment area. It is right across the board. Black people, and I use the term politically, Black and racial minority people are being failed and failed in a really just unacceptable way. So have things changed? They did change, but actually we've gone backwards.
And Kalade, how does your experience of being in Liverpool compare to you come from London? How is it different, do you think, in terms of racism?
Yeah, I think there's a huge difference. For example, in London, I could go to a certain area, and for example, like Brixton, and I could feel like I'm at home. I could feel like I could see an auntie, I could see an uncle, and it's all fine. Coming to Liverpool, especially last year where I lived more central in Liverpool, I felt out of my depth. I felt uncomfortable at times. I felt that I had to dim down my blackness for people. I felt like I couldn't always speak my mind, for example, especially in class where I'm the only Black student. I always feel like I can't be myself 100% just in case I'm too loud, I'm too rude, I'm too disrespectful, having all the stereotypes of a Black person, when in actual fact, I'm just being myself and I'm well in my right to do so. In terms of Liverpool itself, I haven't had any racial problems with myself. I have had certain times where not getting into a certain place just because I'm wearing a certain clothing. For example, I was wearing cargo trousers, but then a white person was wearing the same exact trousers, and then they were let in, and it's little things like that. And I think a lot of the time it's very subtle and it's very subliminal, and it's interesting to think that people don't realize, my white counterparts don't tend to realize that the reason for that is racism, and it is because of the color of my skin. They're like, oh my God, that's so strange. Why does that happen? I'm like, it's because I'm Black, and it's something I deal with all the time, and you are now seeing it. And yeah, it's I would like to say it's getting better, but similar in London, it happens still when I go to certain stores or certain places. I get looked at differently. I get followed. In almost every store I go to, I get looked at differently. That's something we as Black people always go through. As a Black man, they assume, especially when I'm wearing my uniform at school is to wear Black all the time. So when I'm wearing all Black and I'm wearing hoodie, it doesn't tend to seem right, even though if you get to know me, I'm so quirky, I'm so cute, I'm just very spontaneous. I'm not very masculine, so I'm not much of a threat. Not that masculinity is a threat, but yeah, so it's just challenging. It's challenging, I won't lie.
Thanks. And I think it's also the city's quite contradictory and complex, because at the same time, I think Liverpool has been the only place that has stopped the far right from marching. In recent years, we have not had a far right march in our town, and that's been anti-racist protesters coming together with the Black community to prevent that. And I think you said it in the echo, Collada, you almost became the face of the Black Lives Matter protests in Liverpool, but you said it in the echo, how great it was to be supported in that way by white allies. So I think it is a contradictory city in many respects. But I'm going to move on.
Can I just pick up on that point, though, just quickly, though, Mad, in terms of, I think it's one thing standing in a demo and a protest fighting anti-fascists, but it's another in terms of supporting Black brothers and sisters in the workplace that are dealing with racism on a daily basis. That's far more difficult, and I think that's what we need in terms of going forward.
I think that's absolutely.
Just quickly add to that. It's very similar in the sense that a lot of my peers were standing next to me at the demonstration, but are very, very quiet in class, and when stuff is happening, they are very, very quiet. So it's very similar in that sense as well.
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the practical what next. And of course, Tracy, you have recently been not elected, but been asked to chair the race task force, the new race task force for the city. So I just want to ask you, what are your hopes for that? How, you know, how do you envisage, because it's a massive job you've taken on, and I have to say, well done for doing that and congratulations. But how do you think the task force will be able to affect real change?
I think that's the critical piece of work for the task force. So as, you know, we need to look at all the individual areas and break those down. But for me, the key to it in terms of making lasting change, because if the task force just gets a number of projects up and running, or you know, and the other thing what I'd need to say, Maddie, here is that the task, you know, there's lots of work already going on, some fabulous work that's already going on, that's been going on for years before the task force. So there's lots of organisations out there doing fantastic work around race equality and challenge. So you know, and that will continue. The task force will work with and will collaborate and will support those people who are doing fantastic work out there and those organisations. But for me, the critical element of this task force has got to be around breaking down and putting forward the recommendations and putting in for the action plans around the systemic barriers and discrimination that exist. Because unless we change the institutionalized barriers, the systemic issues, then we're not going to have long-lasting change. And you know, we talked about positive action and how great that was, and it was absolutely fantastic in terms of the numbers of people that got into jobs into this city that we'd always excluded. But the kind of, you know, we need to look at what we, you know, the positives were great, but what were the failings? And some of the failings with positive action was the progression and actually about the long-term aspect of positive action. So when the money kind of ran out and you couldn't do it, then it went and it went off the boil and it was no longer a priority. And where are we now? So it's absolutely around tackling the systemic barriers, and the way that we do that really is understanding what they are, and that's speaking to the people who live and breathe it, their living experiences, and also those people who are, you know, who are actually in the system and participate in it. And a big element of that is around education. Because very often, you know, the whole thing around racial discrimination and the kind of insidiousness of it, you know, you've said it earlier, we're the oldest Black community, you know, in this country. How are we still a racist city? Why is Kim the first Black MP, just being elected? That just makes no sense. And that is because when you look at the othering of, and I kind of take us back to slavery, and we're the city of, you know, capital of the slave trades, where our city was, wealth came from, and it was around the dehumanisation of Black people. And that is kept fed through the lines. And whilst we may no longer overtly dehumanise Black people, what we do have is this, you know, there's no expectation of Black people. There were others, so we're not expected to achieve. We're not capable. We're not seen to be capable of carrying out certain jobs. We're not capable of achieving in education. It's kind of, and you know, in the education system, we're not seen to be able to achieve. And there's all these labels around how Black people behave and Black boys behave, and the exclusion. So if you look at schools, I mean, you know, what are the rates of the numbers of Black kids that get excluded, over representation and everything, and so the work of the task force has to look at that systemic racism and to break it down, and that's the only way that we're going to get lasting change. And the other thing that I need to say is that we need to be open and honest, and that the task force can't do the change. It's got to be those organisations. So the work of the task force is to work with those people who've got the responsibility, who've got the power, who've got the decision making, to make sure that when the recommendations do come forward, that they're actually incorporated into the business plans, into their action plans, that they're open and transparent, And it's not just the next 12 months. You know, the short-term recommendations and actions will probably get done, but it's the long-term. It's how are we going to ensure that what we recommend for those longer-term projects are incorporated and taken on board and are monitored and evaluated, and that they're held to account to implement them. So big job, but that's the way we do it, is tackling the systemic racism.
Thanks, Tracy. And I've got a question coming in from one of the audience members, and it's kind of linking, you're talking about education. And it says, in education, there are still very few Black head teachers and teachers. Are those with educational degrees not getting the opportunities? Do we know anything about that within the city? Has there been the research done? Do we know?
So there has been some research done a couple of years ago around the numbers of Black teachers within the city. So there was, I think it was about 3 years ago now, there's been some research. Education will be one of the areas that the task force will look at first. And this will be a deep part of the work in terms of looking at the whole area in terms of Black teachers. Why haven't we got them? And Black and other racial minorities, why aren't they? You know, the very few, full stop, in this city. I think at the time when the research was done, we had 19 Black and racial minority teachers in this city, 19, and I don't think that's changed very much. So the work of the task force will be to, and we're already starting to ask for the data and start to look at what's there, not just at teachers is one aspect of it, but we will be looking at that. So I can't say what the numbers are now, but we're certainly an area that we'll be looking at, as well as the whole thing in terms of attainment and what goes on in schools, the referral units, special needs schools, the whole lot.
Thanks, Tracy. And Kim, you mentioned that you've been hugely active in the trade unions for many years, and you've talked about the need for solidarity within those unions. Do you think that the agenda of the task force is something that will be taken up by the trade unions locally?
I think it's something that needs to be, Madeleine, because I think the Labour Party movement, the trade union movement is all very integral in terms of making significant change. If you're looking at the workforce, supporting the workforce in terms of making those changes, I mentioned in my introduction that I have been an active trade unionist, and I believe that the trade union movement needs to do a lot of work itself. Unfortunately, if you look at senior positions within the trade union movement, it's not very representative. And as a shop steward for Unison a couple of years ago, my union, Unison, developed a DVD to identify the impact austerity was having on public sector workers. But they failed to include any Black people in that DVD, and when I pointed it out, they'd be like, oh, sorry, yeah, we'll do better next time. And I think, well, no, you're not going to do better next time. You're just not going to use that DVD. And it was like a major push and a major challenge and a fight to get senior officers within the union to withdraw that DVD. But that was very telling. Again, in terms of if there's not Black people around the table, if Black people's voices aren't heard, then our issues aren't raised. And that is so very important. And across the whole spectrum of everything that we do, I mentioned earlier that as a Black worker, I'm often the only Black person in a room, in a conference, and having to constantly remind people about the need for greater representation. The Labour Party is exactly the same. I'm one of 5 MPs in this city. We have 5 CLPs. The level of representation across, you know, executive officers, across those 5 CLPs will be again underrepresented in terms of Black people. And the demography of the city has changed significantly over the last couple of years. We know that Liverpool Ace has been gentrified. A lot of Black people have moved out of the community, and so we get more Black people now in other areas that were predominantly white and working class. When I was on the campaign trail, I was very surprised when I was campaigning up in Everton, North Liverpool, to see a greater level of diversity in our schools than I anticipated. So the demography of our city is changing, and sadly, you know, there's still that thought, well, no Black people, no problem. We don't need to elect Black people in this area. You know, we elect people. People aren't going to vote for a Black councillor or a Black MP, and that mindset, like Tracy was saying before, needs to change, and it needs to change significantly, you know. And if it doesn't, we're going to be where we are now. And I keep on saying to people, when I was fighting the fascist and challenging racism on the streets when I was a teenager in the 1970s, I did not expect to find myself here at 60 years old saying and demanding the same kind of rights. So why is that? You know, and I've said, yeah, because of deeply entrenched racism. And Tracy's talked about how these organisations need to make significant change. We've got equality legislation, you know, as a local authority, public sector equality duty, you know, but it's not working. And why isn't it working? Because people don't give a shit, basically, you know, and it's up to us as Black people to bring that fight and make sure that people start to listen. And so Black Lives Matter and the movement has done that, and we need to galvanise that level of support and that energy to start making some significant change.
Thanks, Kim. I've got a point about trade unions, that, you know, fighting fascism is a trade union and Labour Party principle, but why is fighting racism in our workplace and community not given the same importance? And I wanted to just go over to Collade to see if maybe student politics are perhaps more progressive at the moment than traditional union structures.
Yeah. So after the demonstrations, me and my friend, who was also past student at my old school, we thought it'd be best for us to do something for our old school. So we got in contact with our headmaster and our deputy head of pastoral care, and also our head of, who is also the head of all equalities and all policies and stuff like that. And we just told her how we felt at being Black students at that school, how we felt we weren't looked after, we weren't cared for, how we felt they should do better. We gave them examples of scenarios that we had been in, and then also gave them examples of what they could do, just to give them suggestions. They took it very well, and they have been changing their policies because, of course, some of these policies are integrated in the systematic racism. So some of them stuff on their policies actually don't align with what they're doing. So they've just changed that, and they're doing better. But we have a follow-up meeting happening later this winter to see how things are growing. In terms of university, it's a lot more challenging, I won't lie. Again, on the student council team, there's not enough Black people. There's about one Black person. I'm not even able to be there. You're voted in, so if you're not, it's again similar with students, it's a popularity contest. If you're a minority, you don't, for some odd reason, you don't have that popular it factor or whatever, and therefore not having enough Black people to vocalize our issues, it's really hard to then get the ball moving. But we have one Black person who's doing what he can. We are all relaying to him what we feel needs to be done, what can be done. Unfortunately, being at LitPal, having the principal we do have, it's not even about what we're doing or what we're saying. It's more so, if the people who are in charge and the people who have the power and the authority don't want to listen, then unfortunately things aren't going to change. And that's the biggest problem. I think it's about having a change of who's in charge, because if the person in charge wants to have change, then there will be change, and that's indefinite. If people want to see change, then there will be change. But if you don't want there to be change, if you don't want anything to happen, if you like the way things are, then there isn't going to be a change. But I think the more Black people that are in the room, like Kim said, then the more people will understand that this issue isn't just for one person, it is for everyone, and everyone needs to understand that. In terms as on the spectrum, I think most schools, I know because I went to private school, I know that a lot of boards are now changing their policies. They are doing something. I think there's a program, not a program, but a board of for the private schools, and they're doing something. I don't know what is being done exactly, but I know that they're doing their things, they're changing their policies, they're doing what they can to. But my issue with that is, are they just doing that for the sake of a quota, or are they doing it for the sake of having their backs covered? Because at the end of the day, they're saying all of this stuff, but are the Black people rather feeling that they're being supported? I don't know. I know that a group of us here in LIPA want to have an ACS, an African Caribbean Society, so that we can feel that we have a community within our own space, so that we can feel comfortable and have our own space at university. That is currently getting in the works. I'm currently talking to people. I wouldn't say I'm the chair or anything like that, but I am advertly trying to get the ball moving so that we can feel comfortable. It's still challenging. I think there's a lot to be done.
I think there is a lot to be done, and it's absolutely heartbreaking to hear him talking about having to go in this day and age and speak to people and say they're not comfortable, and that actually an Afro-Caribbean society doesn't even already exist. It's just crazy. Well, I hope that we, as older activists, if you like, can lend you some support and some of our wisdom, and that you can share your fresh and new insights with us, because they're as valuable as our experience. Tracy, I've got a real crucial question for you. It's about what resources will be available coming in from our audience. What resources will be available from the City Council for the task force?
So we have been given the resource of staff, and I've got to put I'm in the process of putting the budget request together in terms of identifying what I need. I think I've said this before in another forum, that we all know that there's significant issues in terms of finance within the Liverpool City Council and public sector as a whole. Joe Anderson has given me the commitment that when I identify what we need and what it's for, that the budgets and monies, if that's what is needed, will be made available. So I can't say there's 50 grand, it's all being approved and I've got that level of budget now. But what I certainly have got level of support in terms of officer time and policy officers and programme support, that is all there. It's there. Work in terms of sorting out websites and emails, that's all going through and happening as we speak. So it's there. So all I can say is the proof will be in the pudding, that when I ask for something and if I don't get it or it becomes a problem, then we'll know. But so far, when I've asked for things, I haven't come up against a problem, and I've been told that when I identify what the level of resource is, when it's a financial resource, what it is, that will be granted. Obviously, it's going to be within reason. I can't say, I need 100 million, 100 grand or something. Everything needs to be within reason and costed and explained why we'd need it. It is public money after all. But so far, I've been told that I will be given the resource once I identify what it is that's needed.
I think part of it, we're competing, aren't we, for tight funds within the council, and we're going to be facing another harsh period of austerity. There's no question about that. And when that happens, equality and diversity are the first things to go. And I think we have to. It's not just left to you and the task force. I think the community has got to keep demanding, whether that is of local government or central government as well. Okay,
and also though, this is not just City Council. So the work of the task forces is across. So what other resources can we tap into? And very often it will be around the resource of people. which is what we'll need. You know, there will be some monies that is required, but actually it'll be a resource of people, and how we work together and bring in those people and partners and organisations that I have to say, you know, since I've started work, are reaching out, are saying they want to be involved and want to be part of the task force in terms of looking at their organisations and working with the task force to make change. So as we move forward, you know, we'll see how that actually happens in practice.
Can I just say that's all great and that they're doing that now, but why haven't they made any significant changes prior to this? Which is, from my point of view, a downfall of a lot of these organisations, whether it be health, universities, the fire service. You know, they all have explanations to why they haven't done anything about changing the representation of Black staff within their organisations before now. You know, so it should be
it'll be, yeah, I mean, fundamental part of the task force work, isn't it, in terms of getting that evidence and that discussion dialogue that goes with all those organisations. And yeah, I agree.
I think, you know, from my point of view, I just think it's very damning on all of the organisations in the city that nothing has happened and nothing has changed significantly since the 80s. You know, it is a sad indictment on those organisations, and they should be ashamed of themselves.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement with that. I've just got time is pressing on now, so I'm going to ask you for a quick answer to this one, Kim, which is, if I can find it, can the narrow political system and institutions in the UK represent our multiracial society? And I'm pointing that one at you because obviously you are in the Labour Party. I know you see the faults. You do have some belief that it can be a vehicle for change.
Well, I think if you look at the political bodies that we have in the country at the moment, so there's us, the Tories. I look very scary at the moment on the screen. I look like something from the Queen DVD.
You look like you're having a disco, to be
honest.
honest.
Well, do you know what? Because I've got no lights on and my telly is kind of flashing in the room. So apologies, everybody. Are
you watching the telly while you're on here?
I'm not watching it because if I didn't have it on, it'd be so dark. Anyway, I digress. You know, from my point of view, you know, I am a Labour Party member. I am a Labour MP, and I do believe that it is the Labour Party because we are the largest socialist movement across Europe. We still have over 500,000 members, even though certain people try to do away with that and cause a coup. And anyway, we still are the largest socialist movement across Europe. And I think we need to utilise that, and we need to utilise that in those communities that were lost to the Tories in the general election. And I think there's a job of work to do in our party. I've mentioned it, you know, I have to be honest that we have a job of work to do in terms of being far more representative, working with our branches and our CLPs to be far more representative, and I don't doubt for 1 minute that we don't have racists in the party. You know, the party spoke very, very vividly about anti-Semitism last year, year before, whenever, and I think they need to be calling out anti-Black racism, because we don't hear an awful lot of that, or Islamophobia, you know, and that is pressing and very telling. I was very shocked and surprised when I got to Parliament that we don't have a Black members PLP. We've got 40 Black MPs. And yet no constituted group. But hopefully in the next coming months that might change. But yeah, Labour Party way forward, get more members.
I can see you organising that group, Kim. I've got no doubt about that. Okay, so I'm going to just put one final question to each of you. People have been asking, you know, since the protests, there's a lot of thirst for knowledge, really. And if you could recommend one book for people to read that would help them understand how we can fight racism, what would it be? So I'm very interested in your response to this, Kalade, because I think you might bring me something different to the table.
As a younger person, I would say I'm not a reader, I'm a listener.
Okay, listening.
Yes, I'm a very I prefer podcasts a lot more. So I have a few that I listen to. There's Frank, and he's a Black gay person. So he speaks on how he has dealt with the intersectionality, which I think is very important. It's very important to understand that there is an intersectionality, not only through our sexualities, but our gender and our sexual orientation as well. And then there's Opinionated Podcast, which further discusses the Black female intersectionality, as well as the Black culture, the African culture, and living in a Black household from a younger perspective. So for all my young viewers, if you want to know what it's like to live as a Black young person in a Black household, that one would be very good for you, and how we deal as a millennial with other factors. For example, relationships, dealing with, from a Black female's perspective, dealing with relationship and how she has dealt with white counterparts when it comes to relationships and other stuff like that, the hardships and the struggles that a Black woman faces as a young woman in today's. So those are the two that I specifically listen to and that are important to listen to, I think.
Lovely, thank you, Kalade. I've written those podcasts down, and if you're listening out there, Kalade's recommendations. Tracy.
I think I've just started reading Cast by Isabel Wilkinson, which is American woman that wrote it, but it kind of takes you back to it, you know, that point that I was making. How have we got to where we are now? And it takes you back in terms of history and slavery and the dehumanization of Black people, and why people start to think and act the way they do now. I haven't finished it yet. I'm you know, part way through it. So a really interesting book, and yeah, and you can make the parallels in terms of America and here in Britain, absolutely. And then the other that probably worth a reread really is some of Frantz Fanon work. Around the kind of colonialism and the decolonizing, you know, because we hear now a lot around the decolonization of the curriculum and in the kind of way, you know, work that we're doing. So I kind of thought, yeah, let me just kind of revisit that work. So Frantz Fanon as well wrote a number of books around that subject.
Lovely, thanks, Tracy. And in fact, we've got an event on decolonizing the curriculum on the 7th of October, so do check that out. Kim?
Well, as I mentioned in my introduction, I cut my political teeth, as it were, on the streets of Liverpool fighting the fascists in the 1970s. And so for me, we got a lot of our inspiration from the Black Panther movement. And so I read back in the day Angela Davies' autobiography, and she is an inspiration, you know, and what the Black Panther movement did in America in terms of direct action and supporting each other was something that has stayed with me, you know. So Angela Davies' autobiography, and I did start reading Why I Don't Talk to White People About Race, but I found it a struggle, so I've put that to one side, and I've just been bought and I'm just started to reading Akala's Natives. So yeah, that's where I'm up to at the moment.
Lovely. And if I was asked, I know no one's asked me, but
Go on, I'll ask you, Madeline, what would you?
I would have said, at the moment, I would have said Akala's Natives. I think it really probably bridges the generations. I just love how he starts with his own experience of being a working class mixed race kid, and he just widens it out. He's talking about international capitalism. He's, you know, he connects all this to starting off with the very personal experience, and I think it's fantastic.
Yeah,
okay, we have gone over time, but I make no apologies for that, because I've really, this is a really important discussion, and I've really enjoyed hosting it. I hope you've enjoyed being part of it, and you'll continue to check in with us during Black History Month. So I'd just like to, thank you all massively from everybody at Writing on the Wall. There are some questions that I didn't get onto, and some points actually about around the task force. So we will copy the chat and we will send it on appropriately to our panelists. So to all of you, thank you very much for being with us tonight. And I'd just like to say that tomorrow we have veteran human rights lawyer Shami Chakrabarti, who will be giving a keynote speech on defending equality against the new far right. So please do join us for that one at 7 o'clock, again on Facebook tomorrow. And all I am left to do is thank you for joining us this evening. My name's Madeline Hennigan, and this has been brought to you by Writing on the Wall. Good night.